What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Nightmares Podcast, where we talk about all things horror, movies, music, TV shows, hip hop, movies, books, and in this case, every once in a while, for a very special guest, we shift genres, and maybe we go over to the sci-fi fantasy, and that's exactly what we're doing today for a very special guest. Today, we have on Chad McGhie, hailing from the Great White North. If Chad, go ahead and introduce yourself, good sir.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Pretty excited to be here. Yeah, Chad Ellie McGhee, very excited to be here, and I'm honored that you guys have made some room for me. So I'm just happy to be here.
Absolutely. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and some of your work.
So I am an author and a hip hop artist. So I just released my fantasy novel, Legend of the Tragik. Some of my hip hop music is online on Spotify, YouTube. I just released an album this year called Sideways Dreams, all produced, mixed, mastered by me. Got some videos for it. So if you guys like lyrical boom bap, definitely give my tunes a spin.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, I'm here with my partner in crime, Mr. Zachary Smith.
Yo.
He's out there pushing the buttons for us. So, Chad, we have a tradition here on the Nightmares Podcast where we ask a question. I'm going to adjust it for this podcast, and I really want to see where it goes. I'm actually very excited. So because we're dealing in genre. Normally I say, hey, when did horror enter your life? When did the journey begin for you? But in this case, when did sci-fi and fantasy enter your life? When did this crazy journey start for you?
Well, I've always been a weird kid, honestly. I was
You're in good company.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just always enjoyed things like, I think the first thing I was into when I was a kid was Power Rangers, and I just kind of
We were just talking
we
about
were
that
literally
this
just
weekend.
talking about, by the way, if anybody has not seen the documentary The Toys That Made Us, all about the history of Power Rangers, it's a fucking blast, man. I grew up with that stuff, man. It's a special place in my heart.
Yeah, for sure. And then I just fell in love with superheroes, and then with fantasy, um, I was really intrigued with books like The Hobbit in school, and Final Fantasy, Zelda, all those games and stuff back in the '90s, like Ocarina of Time. Like my oldest son asked me all the time. He's like, "Dad, what was it like be living in the '90s?" I was like, "Bro, it was awesome. It was the best."
I love it how we're the adults now, and it fucking
Right?
it hurts.
It's weird.
It's really weird. It's like you're like, what was it like in the '90s? And I'm like, we used to beat the shit out of each other with sticks, and if you were one of the rich kids, you had sock and boppers like I did. And then you beat the shit out of each other. That's what we did for fun.
I only wish we had a soccer bopper so I could punch you in the face on camera. If I would have known we were going to do this and go this route, I would have absolutely secretly prepped just so we could get a BAM!
I would have grabbed a bunch of old Nerf guns and everything else if we were going to go down this route. It would have been pandemonium, and then because of both of our ADDs, this would have been completely off the fucking rails. But anyway, back to your regularly scheduled program.
Yeah, and no, we had Nerf guns and stuff too. We played back in my hometown. It's a little oil patch town here in Alberta. It's all about the oil patch here, and we played all sorts of swords and sorcery games with sticks. We built forts in the woods, man. I would never trade those days for anything, to be honest. And yeah, so when I really enjoyed books, and like I just loved all forms of media, and I just like, man, I'd love to write something. Like, and actually in grade 3, my teacher's like, holy shit, like you're a phenomenal writer. And that just kind of like kickstarted me. Just like I had some pretty good teachers that kind of pushed me along. And yeah, I just started to write. I actually started to write. My very first one was called Shapeshifter. It was kind of like a play on the Power Rangers a bit. And yeah, that's I made a little comic with all my friends had characters and stuff, and that's how it all like kind of began. And then actually when I was 12 years old, I wrote The Legend of the Tragik originally, its first time by hand when I was 12 years old. So yeah, then I typed it out by hand. I released it once before when I was a kid, but I was never happy with it. So over the pandemic, the music took a hit. I couldn't tour anymore. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to sit down and do this book properly. And now it is what it is now. It's 816 pages, just a monster.
Nice, nice. Obviously, I think Tolkien is obviously one of your big heroes when it comes to literature. When you were growing up, did was there a lot of, I mean, you're talking about some very interesting adult novels that were readily available to you. When most people were reading Goosebumps or just getting off the kick for Dr. Seuss. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, where did this, did you have, did your parents have this stuff readily available? It's like
No.
when I ask people that, like I watched, Friday the 13th when I was 3, and I'm like, where the fuck did you get a hold of Friday the 13th at
Yeah.
age 3? So you're talking about some very adult novels. So I'm very curious on how you got introduced so early to those, very adult novels.
Well, um, the Hobbit we did it. I think it was like grade 4 or 5. So, and I did read all the Goosebumps too.
Oh,
I did.
naturally.
Yeah, but yeah, it wasn't really accessible per se. If my parents had it their way, I probably would have played less games, spent less time in front of the computer writing my own novels. But um, you know, at the same time, they just allowed me to be the creative person that I was. So they knew I was a smart kid and I knew the difference from right and wrong. So yeah, I guess my parents were always a bit more open. I try to be like that with my own kids too. They're gonna learn eventually. So yeah, no, yeah, I just always gravitated towards it, and despite I didn't really fit in with my hometown, but that's okay.
I mean, very rarely do people do.
Yeah,
So these books were just available in your local library or the library at the elementary school.
yeah, we'd go to the bookstore lots, and I think I've collected a lot of my own books over the years, just through allowance or through jobs or whatever. Just yeah, they were all yeah, I had them, so I guess they were all accessible for sure. And
It,
yeah,
that's pretty cool that you chose to go to mature content at books rather than the normal route where people go like, oh, I watch the movies, and and to gravitate towards books at a young age is pretty cool. And it's kind of and I gotta say, you probably were one of the last generations that actually even had that available. I mean, because nobody's in a library these days. Nobody's everybody's in front of their phones. So
yeah,
and there's nothing quite there is something to be said about actually picking up a physical copy of a book. I have an acting background, so and I can't read scripts digitally. I need to have the physical pages because
yeah.
it's otherwise it's just weird to me. So I'm curious about how when it comes to the changes in society and entertainment and even novelizations and everything else, what's been your feeling about the changes that you've been watching as you've kind of come up, and then as you're writing and now releasing a novel in 2022, what are some of the changes that you've kind of noticed?
Well, um, yeah, obviously it's like in my opinion, the books are always better than than the movies, just because there's so much more. Like the best example is probably the Harry Potter films. In all honesty, like they do a really good job until like book 4, then it really starts to derail a bit, just because they don't have the room to fit as much content. They tried to do the last one in 2 parts, but I just feel like it didn't do it justice still. And I commended Game of Thrones for going like the TV episodic route, because that allowed more breathing room, right? So if I were to ever make the Tragik into something like that, I'd probably go that route, so you can actually get the full story without cutting too much, right? Without cutting too much quality. Um, I kind of wrote it with that in mind, right? Because like as you said, I've seen so many changes, right? And like in the '90s, it was not only the best decade ever, but yeah, it really was the last generation where things felt real. You know what I'm saying? In large ways. And um,
What do
uh,
you mean by mean by real? Yeah, expand on that a little bit.
just society's become so copy and paste, and like there's hardly any risk takers anymore. It's like, oh, it's got to make me a fortune or else I'm not playing around with it. You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Absolutely.
Marvel movies are terrible for that. Like movies, I like Marvel movies and all that stuff, but I just really feel like the quality has gone. Excuse me, sorry, has been cut a lot. Um, so yeah, I do want to get into like filmmaking and stuff eventually too. So like I really loved Lord of the Rings as a film. They still cut some stuff from those films, like Tom Bombadil. How do you forget Tom Bombadil, man? Like that's like one of the without Tom Bombadil, the Fellowship never even would have got anywhere. But yeah, they just completely omitted him from the movie. but um, but then The Hobbit was really well done. Like they did 3 movies of one book, so that was like so thorough that they actually had to add stuff, right? So I don't know. It like there's definitely a sacrifice of quality these days for the quicker buck, and yeah, I think you are starting to see a little more shift back towards quality again, because yeah, people are smarter than you think. So yeah.
No, I know, and I know that that even recently, Zach, when I were discussing the newest Avatar situation, and I know
Yep.
that Zach, what was the whole thing? How much money does he need to make?
I think it's 2 billion in order to make a profit or something around those lines, and I'm like, my man, it has been over 10 years since you released that movie, and that was like lightning in a bottle. You had this new 3D technology, everybody wanted to see it, and for the most part, when everybody walked out of that movie, they're just like, visually it was good. Overall, the story was just meh, but it does
Yep.
have its fan voice and its fan base and fanboys, but for the most part, I don't see that movie breaking any records like the first one, especially again 10 plus years. Like everyone
Yeah.
kind of forgot about the movie.
It's also too is it is for better or for worse, James Cameron's plots and synopsis and scripts are very simplistic. And that's the reason why he's been able to sell these movies is because he's had very simplistic pitches. 2 movies that come to mind, and I'm sure, and I know one that I know that he's quoted and everything else was Titanic. His
Yeah.
his pitch for Titanic was Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic. That was it. That
Yeah.
was the pitch. And that's how he was able to sell it because it was so simplistic. And then also too, with Avatar, Avatar is clearly Pocahontas. It's Pocahontas and on a different world. I mean, like that's why it's so simple. I know that when he was coming up with his, early careers, and Terminator is based on a fever dream nightmare. So I mean, it's because I think at the end of the day, you have movies that are visual spectacles, but if they don't have a good, solid story to back them up and something that is timeless, it's not going to last, through the years. It's just not.
Exactly.
It's not gonna be the same. I think disagree or agree. Leonardo DiCaprio had a quote. He said, "Oscars should be given to movies 10 years after the fact." This because quality of movies, should be measured about how they last, not necessarily what's popular in the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. That's cool.
So it's always interesting. So you said you wanted to get into filmmaking. That's
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that that's our wheelhouse. I mean, we run a a horror podcast, but we're also an active studio that works on projects and narrative projects. Zach's our resident post guy has been directing for a very long time, writing. I've been acting since I was 8, and also executive producing. So
That's awesome.
so yeah, thank you. So I want to hear what are some of your aspirations within filmmaking.
Well, I just like to translate some of my own works into film, obviously, and I don't know. You guys look at George Lucas. He did it all himself. I really am inspired by that. I'm like, man, I just think it's so cool how he built everything himself, and obviously with help and stuff. But like the practical effects he used back in the day. He got away from that, but I feel like that energy was really something. So it really, I would love to make a tragic film one day. I was actually, I went and I was an extra on a TV show not that long ago, just to go experience. It was Under the Banner of Heaven with Andrew Garfield. It's on Disney Plus. It was filmed around Calgary. So I got an opportunity to go be an extra, and I just to learn some shit. And yeah, it was kind of fucking cool actually. big studios. Like, yeah, I could just picture turning my books into this shit for sure. And yeah, so you still got lots to learn, obviously, but you know, um, I got a good plan. Just what we're actually getting into, because we haven't been talking much about my music, but what I'm doing next is I'm combining all my worlds into one. So I'm working on a novel that actually has an album to go with it, and we're actually working on the TV pilot right now. And I got a couple actors already like signed up from Vancouver. So we're gonna try to make a TV episode about a modern drama, and it's called a Hot Pretty Blues. So that'll be my first stab into like the filmmaking world, but it's gonna have a novel and an album to go with it as well. That's my big goal for next year. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of aiming for.
So you get a little bit of ambiance with the reading of the novel, and hopefully the album keeps pace as people are reading, which is a really interesting, immersive kind of experience. I know a lot of people play music in the background anyway. So why not your music? What's been some of the biggest surprises that you've learned as you're in these developments? Obviously, Zach and I got a decent backlog, so I'm curious, from somebody who's kind of coming into this fresh, what has been some of your biggest surprises?
Well, the support for the book has been surprising, to be honest, a bit. Just even getting invited to stuff like this podcast, which is pretty cool and pretty fulfilling. In the States, hip hop is way more popular than it is in Canada. So hip hop is a tough business up here. So it was surprising just to see how different. Like I swear I could like invite some of my people I grew up with to my show for free and they still wouldn't come just because they don't care about rap. Like I swear I could bring Eminem himself into my hometown and people wouldn't even believe it was him. That's just like the mentality there, right?
Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah, straight up. They just don't believe that it's possible. Like it's like straight up. It's yeah.
Definitely a small town type of thing.
For sure. Like Canada itself has 39 million people spread across the whole thing. We could all fit into New York City, right?
Holy
so,
shit.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So like people think Canada's landmass is large, but everybody hangs out close to the border. And yeah, I live a bit further. I live in Red Deer, in between Edmonton and Calgary. So I live in a bit of a bigger place, and I've like spidered out. I've toured Western Canada, and I haven't gotten much further ahead, just because people would rather go listen to country and stuff. That just is what it is here. Garth Brooks can sell out like 5 days in a row in the same city here.
Speaking of the 90s, so it's very interesting, and this is actually something interesting that we're experiencing even on our end with horror, which is we actually in the last couple of weeks have been talking to many different people from all over the world. We had a awesome director from Romania, and we also had a horror podcaster from Spain in them. And it's very interesting to hear you say these things, because these things run in tandem. Is in those other countries, horror is non-existent. And
Really?
it's non-existent. It doesn't exist out there, even though they have many reasons to have it there. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that most things that are genre fair, the science fiction, sci-fi, things of that nature, are not as prevalent either. And it's very interesting how the United States is kind of unique in that regard. And it's not really, because we grew up with all of this stuff, right? I mean, I grew up with Star Trek and Star Wars, just readily available. I grew up watching Hercules and Zenith Princess Warrior. So I mean, all that shit was readily available at any given time. So, I mean, I used to, watch all the, the horror cartoons like I'm wearing right now, Real Monsters. So, it's just so interesting to hear that in a lot of these places it's just not available or even looked upon. Especially for hip hop, which is so prevalent. It's almost an American. I think it is an American art form, right next to jazz, and
Yeah.
it's jazz, rap, and westerns. Those are the things that we can probably solely claim as American. So I'm very, and you guys are right upstairs. So it's very interesting that they don't find a value in it. Even in that area. Do they have the same attitude with fantasy and with other things as well in your environment?
Not really. So, like, it's interesting, and that's just it. It's just like, man, it's crazy. That's what was surprising, that the fantasy was so much easier.
Interesting.
Like I got my aunties and my uncles buying 3 copies of my book. It's like, oh, come sign this at Christmas. I'm like, yeah, I got you. You think they've ever been to a rap show? No. But, you know, Canadians are funny because it's I've been to the States too, but it's not very much different. It's very Americanized here in large ways.
Sure.
Canadian broadcasters are actually supposed to play a certain percentage of Canadian content, but that's always getting moved around a lot. So we get a lot of the American content, of course, and then it's frustrating how some things are such an easy sell and then some things aren't. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear other places in the world too. I think the States does offer a unique opportunity because it just has it's such a culture moving nation. You know what I mean? It really is. And so it makes, I've had American artists where I've guys like Locksmith and stuff. They come up here. It's like, oh, this is awesome. I would love to come up to Canada more often. And it's like, bro, I was like, why? There's hardly any people here. You know what I mean? And he says, oh, what do you? We sell out local shows every weekend in the States. I'm like, bro, that would never happen here. And so, yeah, it's just, it's been an interesting challenge. That's what's made me focus. I want to branch out more, get my name more out into the States, into the UK and stuff, right? Just because, yeah, they're just it's actually in the States, about 22% of Americans listen to rap and hip hop, and in Canada it's only about 4%. So that's how big it is.
Huge difference. I think, and by the way, I kind of want to expand upon a thought I just had, and I want to get your take on it, which is, I had this when we were talking to our wonderful podcaster, Mara in Spain. She was letting us know that people in Spain don't like horror because it's unpleasant. They don't like, they're also very superstitious over there. So they don't want anything aggressive, negative. They just get that stuff away from me. I don't want it. Even though they have decades of history of the macabre and the gothic, and they have all this great backlog of stuff. And I wonder that oftentimes in life there is a correlation between metal music, horror, and then rap, because they all have an aggression to them. They all have an energy to them. It's an expression of I don't want to say distaste or displeasure, but a lot of it is strived from the negative side of the battery. It's not always the negative side. It's the DC rather than the AC. And I wonder if that's the same thing within Canada, is that they don't particularly care for rap music because it often implies something unpleasant or aggressive, or it's an art form that is that has a very intricate sound of how it works. It is poetry, but it's poetry through the lens of displeasure, aggression in a lot of ways, and getting your negative shit out the same way that I think metal does. And I think that often pairs a really interesting marriage. And then also, to an extent, so is horror. The horror is also getting out some of the demons and everything else. So I'm very curious if that if you've discovered that that's the same case necessarily in Canada, that people are like, oh, that sounds angry. I don't want to, I don't want to be near that. And, because oftentimes I think rap, metal, and horror, and to an extent, I think fantasy and science fiction get a bad rap because it's just outside. It's outside the fringes of normal society. It's outside the normal fringes of the human psyche. So I'm curious on your perspective on that thought.
I think you banged it on the head, man. I just like, it only speaks to those who want to hear the message, and I think you did nail that in a large way, because a lot of Canadians, they like folk music, country music, just shit that makes you feel good, which is, I get. I like that kind of music too every once in a while, but I think there's a large amount of the population that plays it safe, and like, for whatever reason, they're not willing to accept, like for example, like when I did like a book signing at a Christmas market the other day, and I'm not into fantasy, but this book looks cool. I was like, yeah, no, and not everybody is. It's not your thing. You know what I mean? To some people, it's just not real. Like, how does this relate to my real life? If this can't relate to my real life, then it's not valuable to me, right? So I think that's where that happens with metal. I love heavy metal too. I love going to a heavy metal show because those guys are techno. Like, those guys are fucking insane. Like, I love Trivium. Like, those guys can play, man. Like, those guys can play. And like, musicians speak the same language. Like, genre is really only, in my opinion, a genre is something for the audience. So it's how you organize your audience, right? Largely, creation of music and stuff, no matter what genre you're doing, is largely the same. Like, even though I make hip hop and rap, I've worked with guys with rock and country before too. Like, it's all the same gear, same stuff, So yeah, it's just, I feel like I got off track. I forgot
No.
what
You did great. I think
Yeah.
you said something interesting. You said artists kind of speak the same language, and I just had like a flashback of like an old video from like one of the MTV awards where literally Tupac reintroduced Kiss when they came back on their new tour, and he's like, these awards are all about surprises, and then like, here's my surprise, and then like all of them walked out with their makeup, because in the 80s they got rid of the makeup, but then they came back with the makeup, and he's like, these are my homeboys, and I'm like that's fucking fantastic. Like,
I didn't even know that happened. That's
incredible. Dude, if you get a chance, go on YouTube and watch it. It's so fucking funny, and like, and you could tell that like, even Pac had a real appreciation for their music and their artistic flair, like their performance flair.
Yeah.
Like, and he really dug, like what they were all about, and it's really cool. So artists kind of speak the same language,
Yes.
like, and I could talk to people that are, different types of filmmakers and different types of artists, but I think that it all comes from just a way to express yourselves. But I think that's something that's lost in small time. I think more at the end of the day, people that are in just smaller towns and everything else are very set in their ways, and they're not willing to to explore things outside of their comfort zone, or more importantly, they feel that growing up means dismissing things that they feel are childish.
Yes, and I think that's right there is a tragedy. What's that one quote? I'm gonna mess it up, but this one quote by this one skateboarder, he actually passed away. Oh fuck! I'm gonna like look it up quick, because but it's like, he's like, it goes along something like, you're not old. You're not too old. I missed. How does it go? It goes, you're not too old to skateboard. You got too old because you quit skateboarding. That wasn't it either. Hold on, I gotta find it because it's bothering me.
I trust me, I know, dude. And then Mark Twain had a great one. Age is a mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah, it was always a great thing. While you're looking that up, I think that's an interesting thing, in culture, is that people are not willing to, I think people are becoming even more, because of even more technology, are becoming, even more closed-minded than they ever were. Which is kind of weird, because you would think that the technology would expand, their reach, and it has to a certain degree. I think it's, really connected people that never would have connected before. But I think it's like, dividing people even more so they don't want to leave their little bubble.
Yeah, I have a big beef with, like, I have such a mental debate with the technology, like, just because, of course, it's allowing this podcast to happen right now. Like 20 years ago, we wouldn't even be able to do this. You know what I'm saying? So it's created other opportunities. But it's like you said, like the negative part of the battery.
Yeah.
Like Twitter, Facebook. I'm sure you guys have like 90% of your feeds are just people like crying about life, right? It's crazy, and it's just like, and I think people become more closed-minded because they have a platform that allows them to be that person. And yeah, it's crazy. And I've lost so many friends over politics and shit. It's sad. It's just sad, and it's become more divisive. Like you said. So yeah, no, that's why I just like to play in my world and create things that brings people together. Honestly, so yeah.
Did you have something to add, Zach?
No, sorry. No, I try to stay off social media, like specifically for reasons like that. Like that shit just annoys me. I don't want to deal with that shit.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to that shit. I don't want to hear people bitch about their lives all fucking day. I have my own problems, and I ain't got time for that shit. Funny enough, I saw Corey posting about this the other day. It's just like, yo, why is everybody so depressed all the time?
Yes.
And I thought that was hilarious. It's just like what's up with everybody? And I'm just like, I just feel like a badass, my man.
Yeah. I totally saw that too, and yeah, I agree, man.
Like, life's too goddamn short. Like, try to enjoy it. Like, an old friend of mine, like, all he would do is sit around and cry on Facebook about every little thing. Like, all his problems. And this man was presented with so many opportunities to improve his life. But what did he do? Lay down and bitch on Facebook like the little child that he was. It was annoying.
Yep.
I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Just get it. Do something, man.
Move.
Yeah.
Literally, move. Go for a walk. It'll help. I used to do that all the time. Now I just fucking work all the time, but that's besides the point. It's all to improve myself, I swear.
He swears. He swears it's working, I swear.
Don't get sad, get angry. Let that rage fuel your fire.
There you go.
Well, that's right.
Like Kratos in the Doomslayer. Metal.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, one thing I've definitely learned over the years, like, nothing worth doing is easy. So
no, nothing at all.
And yeah, I think humanity has a new addiction, and everybody's addicted to getting notified. Oh, those little notifications. The more notifications I get, the more my feelings of self-loathing or whatever are justified. You know what I'm saying? And it's, yeah, life. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. You're good.
Life is short, and life can be depressing, but like if you choose to see the good, there's a ton of good, right? So yeah, and then choose to work hard every day on making bettering yourself. Nothing wrong with that at all.
100% agree, man.
Absolutely, and then also too, just to have a purpose. I mean, this is what we're doing right now is far more interesting. I mean, like we're having this is for all the young kids that are watching and everything. This is what people used to do before technology. We had fucking conversations. Sometimes they were interesting, sometimes they were silly, sometimes they were real fucking stupid. But we had them, and all of them had a purpose, and they were all enjoyable to some degree. Conversations were a good thing.
I really wish I had a soccer bopper to punch you in the face right now, because that would have been hilarious to include.
I really wish you did too, honestly.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Dix. Dude, I just met you. No, that's how I make
See,
friends.
this is why life is worth living, because you could just punch your friend in the face and everyone's happy.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. No, it's just it just sucks that people don't have artistic purposes and everything else. So I do want to get an opportunity. Let's you talked a little bit about your book and everything else. Give our audience kind of a synopsis, and then maybe talk about some of the where you started. I know you started very early on the inspiration of this story, but talk about some of the ideas that ended up leading to the story. Why did you feel that you needed to tell this story in particular?
Well, it was more of a. I guess it was more of a. I've always loved fantasy. I've always wanted to tell my own story. Like Legend of the Tragik is a pretty familiar story because like a lot of fantasy stories have a young man that comes from a village. He ends up facing problems, right? What makes Legend of the Tragik stand out is its own unique flavor, and it's very intelligent and lots of world building, and everything makes sense. You won't ever have a question of why anything is happening, right? So everything is pretty thoroughly explained. And honestly, it was I just did it for a lot of like I wanted to do it just so I could like become an author, you know what I mean? And just people might like or love or hate the first book, but it's a start, and like I started young, and I've had kids, I've had tons of mistakes over the years, bad relationships, everybody makes bad choices and stuff, and I just think, man, I want to do something amazing. So I guess I just was fired up to do this. Like not many people from my hometown have like written books, and some people build houses, some people weld, some people write books, it's all a part of human society. So I don't know, I guess it just feels like it's my purpose. I have the ability, I was given the ability with words, so I may as well use them. Legend of the Tragik was challenging because I knew I wanted to make its own beast for sure. So it's about Heinro. It takes place in a fictional world. The kingdom of Tristram and Zemots are at war. They have been for a long time. Tristram they're known for making magical weaponry, and their wizards and stuff are pretty good. And so the blade mages, they create the weapon that is actually what the Tragik eventually becomes. The Zemots steal this weapon, and the Tragik is basically a magical weapon of mass destruction, right? So they can kill a whole bunch of people. And the Tragik, in the beginning of the Tragik, there's a treaty supposed to be signed, but there's the descendants of the blade mage Volgair, he knows that something's up. And Heinro himself, the main character, he gets wrapped up in this whirlwind of between these kingdoms, of course, but a power awakens within him that kind of breaks the rules of everything else, and that makes even the blade mage Volgair look at Heinro a little bit sideways too. He's a bit dangerous. He can nobody's sure if he's actually good or bad. So there's a lot of work. I don't want to spoil too much of the book, obviously.
No,
of course.
But yeah, it's quite a. There's lots of war. Like it's definitely like a battle. Lots of big battle scenes. Lots of magic. Try to really make it like a cinematic experience, even for a reader. Lots of like human emotion too, and like that's the big difference. It's like you're gonna feel this dude's pain. Like you're like the Tragik is a play on like the tragic circumstances of the world and like the events of the story that are occurring. So yeah.
I love that. That's fantastic. The it sounds, it's got that classic element and everything else. It's so many great stories that from before that worked about two warring factions that and then somebody
Yep.
that's caught in between them. The Romeo and Juliet's, the Hatfield and the McCoys.
Yep.
Well, Romeo and Juliet, that's the Montagues and the Capulets. The so did you when you were working on this? Obviously, you worked on this from a very very young age, and you may not remember. But were you looking at, I always say this science fiction, horror, and fantasy are always allegories to the world around you. And obviously there's something to relate about being in a small village, just, as you said, you grew up in a small town and venturing out to something big. Did you take any inspiration from any world events or anything that you were seeing, or did this kind of just float right from your imagination and you just ran with it?
Well, it was largely from my imagination. Like, the world is a rough place to begin with. I've studied a lot of anthropology and sociology in my years too, so I definitely threw some of those elements into it. So like sociology is like studying why humans do things to each other.
I love
right?
sociology.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's fascinating.
It is, yeah. It's I made going for my English degree, but once I started taking some sociology classes, I made it a dual one. So I'm going for sociology and English now. But yeah, I wanted to incorporate just the broader human consequence, if that makes sense. Like war is a shitty thing. So like the bad guy Cleo, he's a prick. So he's a prick. So once you read the book and you're like, man, people are actually like that though. That's just it. There's been human atrocities that people are actually, and it's just gross. But it's just to show like humans can be bad, but humans can be good too, and yeah, so there's a lot of real human emotion, despite it being a fantasy novel. Like, the emotion is what it's based off of. Like, Heinrich was trying to save his mom. He's, trying to save his kingdom from certain doom. He's trying to figure out himself too, because he doesn't even know if he can trust himself. So, yeah, it's it was a lot of, as I was finishing the book, I was getting emotional myself. So I knew that this was going to be good. So I just knew that I was on the right path. And so I'm excited for people to read it and enjoy it. It's a long ass book, so I'm not expecting people to like hurry up and read it. Cause yeah, I honestly didn't mean to, but I just like kind of kept on rolling, and yeah. I was like, 500-600 pages. The publisher gets back to me, 816. I'm like, holy fuck! There goes 95% of the people that I know that are going to read it. So yeah.
All the other, the most fantasy novels are very, very, very large and everything else. So it always, kind of goes that way. The, I was curious, as we're talking, I'm gonna get real, like, I kind of a little nerdy on literature and script making. Did you, when you were writing this, did you kind of go the black and white route, or did you go the, more complexity and gray? Because Star Wars is based on, Joseph Campbell's work, and that's all very like clear archetypes. That's very like good guy, bad guy. It doesn't get complex until like Empire, but Star Wars: A New Hope was very like of the old stories of this is everybody's clear area of turf. You got the good, you got the bad. Everything is good. And then you have then you have Game of Thrones, which everyone's a fucking prick, and or you have you have most of sci-fi where there's so many areas of gray, and so many Lord of the Rings is very gray. Not everybody's perfect, and people make mistakes. Harry Potter is very gray. It's a little bit more archetype. Lord of the Rings is far more gray. Frodo fucks up, and and other characters are tempted by the ring. So there's plenty of gray. So when you were working on this, did you kind of go more George Lucas, or did you go more Tolkien?
Tolkien all the way, man. That's why he was the GOAT. That's why he just, and even like you can see that even in the movies, like that gray, just like you can feel that, you know what I mean? Like you can feel his temptation. It's like, man, is he gonna do it? Like, is he going to, like, and humans in real life, like some are the boring ones are pretty one-sided, I guess, but everybody's different, you know, and everybody reacts to situations, problems, challenges differently, you know, and so I really like to believe that my characters are definitely like, to me, they're real people, even though they're not, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, so they have to have like layers to them. It's definitely more gray. They're not just one side. Well, like Cleo is kind of a prick. He is kind of a prick. But at the same time, you get insight into his past where he wasn't always a prick, right? So, and you see, like, one of the perspectives is because it does have multi perspectives, right? Like you see things from Heinro's viewpoint, obviously, from Bolgar's. Nexus is another character. She's basically side by side. She's like she's actually she's the ambassador for another kingdom, but she lives in Zima. It's like the bad place, so she can see all the bad shit unfolding around her, right?
So she's just caught in the middle, and she doesn't really have a horse in the race necessarily, but she lives where the fucked up shit is happening. But she represents a completely other kingdom that's not even involved in this bullshit.
Yes, exactly. So she's just an ambassador, and she just kind of caught there with the other ambassadors, and she just can see this kingdom going to shit, people being thrown in concentration camps, basically. And when she's promised that this isn't going to happen, right? It's really like definitely some parallels to like the Nazi regime for sure. Like the Z-Mots, they're just do some awful shit. So basically being Switzerland in the mix. You know, you're not involved in the shit, but you still live in the bullshit. Yeah, so what the Nexus ends up doing, she ends up trying to like feed the prisoners. She tries to like free them, like sneaking around, trying to get herself in trouble, right? So
I love that. So hey, let's have this a little bit of a fun conversation. So if they do turn this into something artistic, if you had your choice of getting anybody to play any of these roles, what would it be? I was having a fun conversation with Zach about Mortal Kombat. If they made it today, like who would we want to be in if we had a free running list, and we had fun, at doing that. So I'm curious, if you had, free reign to get anybody you want to play some of these roles, who would they be?
Well, if I could bring back people from the dead,
sure.
Heath Ledger would be a great Heinro. I always thought that. And then when he died, I was like, oh crap, there goes that. I haven't given it much thought, to be honest, but there's a lot of great actors out there now, like so many. So that's tough to say, but I mean,
that's why these it brings up some fun stuff of like trying to figure out who we do. I mean, how we went back to the 2000s and into today, trying to figure out who we would cast for the new the old Mortal Kombat or the new one. So Terry Crews is brought up in the conversation, which is always nice.
He would be the perfect Jax.
He would be the absolute perfect Jax. I don't know if you're a Mortal Kombat fan. So like we said Jax and the one, I think the one girl from The Mandalorian would be great. The one that was a UFC fighter for Sonya. So I mean, it was just fun stuff like that. You might have to give that some thought, man, because you may be in a position where you have to make those decisions, or at least provide a suggestion.
Well, that would be the goal. Like if ideally, because we haven't even started like a big marketing kick. This is actually the first podcast I'm doing, like a virtual book tour starting December 26th. And then I'm appearing on a whole bunch of different blogs in the States. So this is a great way to kind of start it off. But if say the Tragik blew up and I had some like movie company come and like, hey, we want to turn this into a movie, there would be some stipulations probably. Like, A, I'd want to be involved. Probably.
Of course.
Yeah.
Naturally.
B, when it comes to casting, I think I'd like do like open like rehearsals and like give somebody new a shot, to be honest. And
Perfect.
I think because like getting back to Star Wars, like a lot of those guys had their big break through Star Wars, even though they had appeared through movies and stuff before. I just think it'd be cool to do that. Just kind of give some new young guns a shine, because like in Canada, like I just feel like some people are like, oh, you've been at this for so long, how come you're not famous? Yada yada yada. It's like, bro, everybody's ignored here, and I know like there's actors that do that too. So there's some real like talent out there in the rough, man. Like some people that you wouldn't even like know or think of. So yeah, in my mind, I think the most magical way to do it would be to give like somebody who's hungry for success, and they're driven to succeed, you know, like all those like young guns like that. I think that would be the ticket. I know the landscape of where I live, like Alberta, there's plains to my east, there's mountains and foothills and forests to the west of me, so I could definitely film something here for sure. A lot of shit is filmed around here, actually.
Honestly, you'd be better off filming there, and everything else you're probably able to get it done, and then you'd be able to get it done in the independent sense. Things get done a lot faster that way. So yeah, no, absolutely, and dude, thank you so much, man, for making us your first stop, on this virtual book tour. I'm very excited to see where it all goes. I did want the opportunity though to talk about your music, because I know that we've had Corey on here, and we've had a couple composers on here as well. And it's always kind of cool. I know that I've always had appreciation for hip hop, and Zach's definitely more of the metalhead. Although I am too. I'm a fucking weirdo when it comes to music. Like I got Backstreet Boys next to Metallica, next to Cannibal Corpse, next to Sinatra.
Nice.
So it just goes all over the place, and
oh man,
and I love it. I love it all the time. It's great. It's it's good to have that kind of variety in my life. I got a music for every mood. I can paint with a lot of different colors and not just gunmetal gray. As one of the guitarists from Megadeth once said. But I'm curious, man. How did you get started in hip hop? How did that whole journey begin for you?
Well, I liked hip hop earlier. Same time I was playing all those games, actually, in the '90s. Like, there's a lot of good hip hop, man. And like, I think Dr. Dre was my first, and then like Limp Bizkit, all that stuff. It was funny. My mom was trying to take away all those bad CDs, but then my dad was giving them back to me. So, so yeah, and I just loved it, man. And, I just was so intrigued with the music and just like the stories, like the messages. I love DMX, man. Like DMX art. Rest in peace, man. He was one of my first one, and just his rawness, his raw ability, just to like vent on a record like that, man, was crazy. And like, of course, I fell in love with Eminem too, because like he's just like his technique is insane. And really, when I started was around the 8 Mile era. So,
of course,
really funny story. And so many white rappers started around then. It's sad, in all honesty, but. So I was in grade 9, 14 years old, went and watched 8 Mile. It was like, man, that was fucking awesome. Rap battles, that was fucking badass, right? And then my friends, they started like writing rap notes to each other, like rap battle, like on letters, you know what I'm saying? Like not like reciting it, but like they write like, oh,
my dearest homie, I shall take the wench away from you.
Yeah.
Sincerely, Mick Awesome Pants.
That's basically what it was. So it was, and that was probably a better bar than what those bars honestly probably had. So. But that's how we started, man. And then my one buddy, Farron, I actually just talked to him not that long ago, because this actually came up. A lot of people in my life have been coming back into my life because of my book too, actually, which has been kind of crazy. But he went onto this one website called rapbattles.com, and that changed the game for me altogether, because he showed me, we're in the freaking school library on the computer. He's like, go check out this website. It's Rap Battles. You can text battle these guys. And I was like, okay. so I did that, right? And that was the first foray into it. And that's what introduced me to like the international hip hop community. There was Americans, there was Europeans, everybody was on there, right?
Nice.
And then I fell in love with it. I just like text battled it, but then it just text battling wasn't doing it. So then there was a side where people were recording their audios. That's what got me into making music. So when the audio battles, I started doing audio battle. That's when I learned how to make and like record, mix and master and stuff. I couldn't flow to a beat to save my life when I first began, right? But then I had some like good advice from those guys, like dudes like Carson Jett. I don't even know where the fuck that guy is now, but like just forum names, right? Like rap forums. And I just like built my technique from there. Nobody was nice. You know what I mean? It was like nobody had to be nice. So it's like that was the best way. That was so competitive, and that was the best way to build my skill. And then there was like rap battles in Canada, but KOTD just they never got back to me for some reason. And then I wanted to battle in person, but then it just never occurred. And I just like focused more on my song making. I ended up having kids and shit. There's been kids who tried to diss me and shit before, and they're like, "Oh, respond." I'm like, "Nah, bro." And then they ended up apologizing to me. You know what I mean? So I just like I learned to focus more on the song creating, because like battling is fun and all, but it's not really why I want to make music, right? So I learned that, and then I started focusing on albums and stuff, and like making music videos. And yeah, man, it's fun. I love performing. I love making music. I love being on stage, and just like knowing the room is mine, because they're just like I don't fucking rap over my own songs at shows. Like it's straight raw performance, like on stage every time. So I like come up covered in sweat, just like all these multiple syllable rhymes. I love it. I just wish there was a bigger audience for it in Canada. Cause yeah, a lot of the times you end up playing for small crowds and stuff. Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fun, man. I love music, and I do got some pretty good musical fans too. They just said, getting them all in one spot is hard.
No, I hear you. I know Canada is very vast, as you said. You know the and I love that too, because you know when you're performing, man, is the equivalent of having the basketball, you know, in a basketball game. Like everybody, all the focus is on you, and you control the movement of everybody else on that court. Yeah. When you have the ball, and there's no feeling and no drug, no feeling that ever gets you to that point to know, you know, that it's you, man. Everybody's on you. And you control the flow and the pace of everything. It's a fucking insane experience.
It is, and I love it, man. It's such an adrenaline rush. Like the Screaming Sage tour we did this year was really good. So it was my biggest tour ever. Like I drove fucking so much. Like if I was converting it to miles, I can't even I drove like 30,000 kilometers. So miles is like 10,000 miles or something like that.
Holy shit.
Like Canada's huge, man, because like I drive my kids to and from school every day. Right. So I live in Red Deer. I drive my kids to school, and then like on the weekends when I have tours, I go out and do these shows. I'll go and do one part, then come back, and then I'll go out and do another part, then come back. And then like Red Deer, it's kind of like central to Western Canada, so that's allowed me to do that. I haven't been all the way across yet because it's just so fucking huge. It's actually quicker to cut through the United States to get to Toronto than it is to drive all the way around. So yeah.
I've said this a couple of times, man, and you know, one of these days maybe, you know, Corey got drunk on Facebook one time and was teasing it. He's like, I want to just come and live down there with you guys and you know, be the third member in here. And I'm like, don't you fucking tease me, man. There's a seat right here for you. But like, you know, you guys would be tremendously successful if you came down here and did your thing in the States. You know, maybe one day. It's very cool. How did you meet Corey? How did that all start?
Yeah, so yeah, like I was saying, it's just a tight knit hip hop community up here. He works with my good buddy Jay Reds, who I first did a lot of my first tours with, and yeah, he's come down to Red Deer. I've been up in Edmonton, and we really only see each other at shows, but he's super friendly, and yeah, it's super supportive. He was the one who got me on this podcast. So, and I know he was super excited about my book. And yeah, we've just known each other just through the community over the years, and that's basically how a lot of people know each other up here is through the community. Oh, I've did this show with you, or I've seen your video, or stuff like that. And yeah, we've had a chance to be at a few shows together and have a few good chats. And he's just and like just what he posts about, you know, it just shows what kind of a character he is. He's just a very bright energy, you know. Like I said, why is everybody so damn depressed? Like, it's just, yeah, bro, it's like, fucking be happy to be alive. Like, it's a pretty random thing to be alive, even. So yeah, be happy.
I know
Any day could be your final day.
Yeah,
Exactly.
any day above ground is a good day. And actually, you know, man, he's been incredibly sweet to us. He's always shared our stuff. We've had many, you know, private conversations. You know, I've had many private conversations with him via Messenger. Hey man, how's it going? What's going on? Congratulations on getting engaged. I know he congratulated me as well. You know, it's been a really fun relationship thus this far, and I'm gonna cut this together and send it to him. Just to make him feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But it's the relationship that we actually share with Corey is what the internet was always supposed to be. Which is connecting with like-minded people and building a relationship without necessarily even meeting them in person. And I think that the interesting part is I'm so looking forward to meeting him in person. Because that's going to be, it's like at that point, it's just like reunion, getting together with an old friend, somebody that I already know, and I'm already quite fond of and he's said just, amazing things about us and, publicly and privately, which has been tremendously, supportive. I love people that bring people together in a way that normally isn't possible. You are the second guest that we've had today based on his introduction, actually. So
that's awesome.
His producer Squib out of Bend, Oregon, and everything else. I don't know if you know him.
I don't know him actually.
He was on here. His name's Ian. He actually works at the Last Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon.
No way.
Yeah, so we had a great conversation.
The last Blockbuster in the country, maybe even around the world.
No, it is the last Blockbuster in the world.
Oh, okay.
The last one.
Just fucking awesome, and he was telling us all about it. And we may even be getting an interview with like the guy who runs the place too. So that'll be fun.
Yeah,
don't quote me on that.
Yeah, don't quote me on anybody on that. So and
that's awesome.
And what we may do too is I think this would be cool. We may have the three of you on one time and have our entire Canadian troupe on the call on one podcast. Awesome. Like I would love that. That would be fucking dope. So hey, so what I normally do is I end the podcast with a question of the podcast. It's just something I fucking just make up, halfway through this. And one of the ones this might be really hard for Zach, but pretty easy for you and I, maybe, is, what's a novel or a graphic novel, comic book, anything in the written form that has not been turned into a piece of entertainment of some kind that you would love to have it be turned into a piece of entertainment, a movie, a television show, something that just hasn't happened yet. And you're like, this needs to get turned into something and everything else. And as per our tradition, we always let the guests go first, but if they do want to pass, they can pass. So,
I'll hear you guys first. I don't mind for sure, but yeah, I'll just be the polite Canadian.
My God! Well,
go ahead.
This is a podcast first. For a guest to pass it, a guest has never passed. So this is a Nightmares podcast first. So that's fantastic. I'll give Zach a minute to think about it. Mine's actually a book called Hawks Harbor by S.E. Hinton. If that name sounds familiar, that's the one who wrote The Outsiders. Is actually the story about a man who's a traveling vagabond who's actually dealing with the trauma of being tortured and drained by a vampire, and it's his life story.
Crazy.
It's a great book. Great book. I was blown away by it. I'm like, this is fucking fantastic. And I just hope that they stay true to the book, because the last book that I read that turned into a movie, it was very disappointed, which was Ready Player One. I have a lot of issues with that movie, even though I love Spielberg. Obviously, I got a huge Jaws poster behind me. But yeah, that's definitely something that I would love to see be turned into, a piece of TV or movies. How about you, Zach?
So the problem with this is everything I have ever read is either based off a movie or a game, so in turn, everything I have ever read has already been adapted to some other form of media because I'm an illiterate piece of shit. The first book I will be reading that's not based off anything is Dennis's novel, and then soon my friend's novel because he wants me to read it and go over it, so I'm like, okay. And maybe soon even this guy's novel right here. So
I appreciate it.
legit do not have anything that has not been adapted to either a movie or a video game or any other form of media. Like, my backlog of books, anything Predator related, anything Alien related, anything Star Wars related, Terminator even, God of War, The Darkness, Spider-Man, all that stuff has been adapted. Some of it even originates as a movie already, so...
All right, I'm going to extend an olive branch for you because I have a way for you to answer this question.
Oh, boy.
So, something that, because a lot of these stuff that you've read has been based on a property and everything else, but I'll even include things that are based on a property but have not left the form of written text. So, example, I know that there was a couple Evil Dead, like Terminator cross. You hated them, but like there was like an Evil Dead Terminator crossover, or a Predator and Alien Terminator crossover.
We don't talk about that
I
comic,
know
Mark.
it was really, really bad. It was really bad, but I'm using it as an example of any Star Wars novels that you would love to see get transported into them. Anything from the
That's easy. The original, actual, real sequel trilogy that Disney decided to say, fuck you, we're just going to do our own lame bullshit.
I agree with you.
Yuzhan War should have been the real sequel trilogy. Fuck you, Disney.
All right,
I agree.
I
agree with that.
There you go. So that's your answer. I extended the olive branch for Zach on that one because I know that there are several comic books and other things that are based on that. Like I would love to see an actual remake of The Mask based on the original comics. It's more horror, darker. I would like to see more of that. So I extended the olive branch. So what's a piece of literature or comic books or anything in the written form that you would love to see translated into TV or movies?
This is a pretty easy one for me, to be honest. Because, out of all the stuff, like, you see stuff that is in the mainstream, like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Dragon Balls, all that stuff, right? Something for me, one of the best fantasy works I've ever read was from a Canadian author, and it's the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Backer. He's an author from Ontario, Canada. He's a philosopher. He's a teacher. He's a university professor. But man, you want to read a dark, graphic, dirty, and like terrifying fantasy novel? Prince of Nothing trilogy is definitely it. That is like hands down one of the best works I've ever read, hands down. Just because of its world building, its depth, its characters are incredible. Like these characters are like whoa, like so unique. I know that he's hit some success. Definitely never talked about a movie though. It definitely deserves to be though. It trumps Game of Thrones big time.
Nice,
in my opinion.
Nice.
So yeah,
nice. We did the very millennial thing, and we all went to our phones to go look it up.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh my, so all right, Chad. Thank you so much, man, for being on the podcast. We really, really appreciate it. This is your opportunity to look directly into your camera and let the good people know where they can find you on all your social medias, your YouTubes, your TikToks, your Facebooks, all that stuff. I'm sounding really boomer like, but it certainly makes sense.
All good.
But yeah, go ahead and tell them people where they can find you. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for having me again. It's been a lot of fun. My name is Chad Ellie McGhie. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where you find and love your hip hop music. My novel, Legend of the Tragik, is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. If you want a Kobo ebook, it's available as well. You can search me up at eversongenuity.com. My website is down right now. I'm just like re-collaborating it, but it will be back up this week. And I hope to, if you feel free to send me messages on Instagram, Facebook, email me if you ever have any comments about Legend of the Tragik or any of the music. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to come down to the States one day and perform for you guys too. Thank you guys so much for having me.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. And then go ahead. Ed, were you gonna say something?
No.
Okay. So I'm gonna close out this podcast. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Nightmares Podcast. You can find us on anywhere where podcasts can be found: YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, all those great ones. And if you are watching us on YouTube, if you could be so awesome to stab that like button, stab that subscribe, and I messed that up.
Good job, buddy.
And then click that little dingy bell to be notified every time we drop amazing content right here on MHN. And, of course, if you could be so awesome to follow us on all of our social medias, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and
Slasher,
the application for all things horror. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the Nightmares Podcast. Bye, guys.